Welcome to Behind the Grind. I'm Matt Donnelly, and joining me today, all the way from the NFL Network, courtesy of NFL Fantasy Live. Momentum, it may not be a thing, but the legend that is Patrick Clayborn certainly is. How are you doing today, Patrick?
Matt, thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate you.
I've been looking forward to this one for quite some time. Every once in a while when I have guests on, I go, who do I need to get on the next show? Who do we need to get there? And your name has come up multiple times. Here we are. We're going to get at it. Now, I don't know if they're recommending you because they had some stories to share with us. They want to kind of throw at you throughout the show, but I'll take whatever I can get in each and every episode.
Yeah, well, I mean, Matt, the thing about me, and it'll come up a lot, I'm the luckiest person in the world. A lot of that has to do with the people that I've come across who, for some reason, have chosen to like me, and they've supported me through any number of ways. And all these people are way more talented than I am, right? It's just like, and you come across, it's like, hey, why is this? I'm just blessed. I'm just super fortunate to have come across so many people who have the same goals and aspirations and kind of honestly worldview that have made things pretty easy for me. And so yeah, anybody that told you it was doing me a favor, honestly, because a lot of people have just done me favors by being in my life whatsoever.
Well, the one thing that I really have grown to appreciate throughout this series is I've had a lot of opportunity to speak with those at the NFL Network there, from Adam Rank to Marcus Grant, LQ. I mean, these are people who've all spent some time on the show, and they've had one thing in common, and they're all great people. So, I mean, you talk about being fortunate enough. I mean, those are the kind of friends that you've been able to surround yourself with over at the NFL Network and in Fantasy Live. So, I mean, we have them in your corner. What else do you need when it comes to this industry? So it's kind of a testament to everything there.
Yeah, I mean, no, literally, because like there's so many aspects of, right, everybody has parts of a job that they don't like. But the people that, especially on that show, right, the people on Fantasy Live, of course, so much of that is because of Rank and Marcus, right, being there through different iterations of the show, the Alex Wilkes of the world, the Todd Mossbergs of the world, that facilitate the show, the researchers. It's all a real collaborative effort by people who want to educate and entertain, while doing the same thing with each other. Like like we learn stuff from each other and we entertain each other, and people are, they put up with us. And it's like, I can't believe I get to do it. Like, there's so many times during the season where we'll finish something up. I'm wearing an abominable snowman costume, standing in front of a green screen, and somebody's throwing snowballs at me. And it's like, I'm getting paid for this. Like it's really, like there's all the other times, where you're doing, it makes those times in the newsroom at 3 a.m. when you're covering breaking news, it makes all that worth it that I get to do this now. And I'm so glad that I did.
Well, those 3 a.m. news breaks, I mean, those could drag on waiting for something to happen. So maybe every once in a while you're going to put some music on to kind of get you going. So we're going to talk a little bit of music. One thing that I know from the NFL Fantasy Live show is there's a lot of personalities, a lot of wrestling type conversation, a lot of movie type conversation, unless you're Florio, who hasn't really seen any movies in his entire career.
Oh, he's young. You have to give him that.
We talked about that once upon a time, too. Now, if you were coming out to the WWE wrestling ring, or maybe you're coming out to close out the ninth inning for the Angels, Dodgers, whatever you happen to have out there, whatever your cup of tea happens to be, what is that intro song for Patrick Clayborn going to be?
Oh my God, dude, Matt. There's so many choices. I mean, I would have gone with the Imperial March, for a very long, it depends on, what's my role. Like, am I healing currently? Then it's going to be the Imperial March. Right. Like I may run through the whole, like we may go Duel of the Fates. It's going to be some John Williams produced and composed track. I may go with the Jaws theme. Those are like the anthems to my life almost. And so like I'm going to keep it simple. We're going to go orchestral. There's not really going to be any lyrics. People can make some of their own. Right. Like it, I think of, I think of the "You Suck" chant. Right. Like if you want, just crowd involvement, however it goes, and I would egg it on. That would be incredible. Now I think about it.
Well, if I was coming out to the Jaws theme and I was coming out of the bullpen, I mean, I think the music would be the Jaws theme, but I think of the t-shirt marketing here. I think about marketing more than anything to be like, we're going to need a bigger bullpen if I'm coming out, because I'm going to get pulled out right away again. You're going to have to bring another closer in to kind of cover for me. What about a guilty pleasure song? Because I know we all have them. I mean, my kids have been listening to music for good Lord knows how. Like Trolls, the Trolls movie just came out, so I had to listen to Trolls on repeat for a
Can't
long.
stop the feeling.
You know what? And then also you start tapping. You're like, oh,
Yeah.
doing to myself. So what is that song for you where you're like, you're not supposed to like it, but you can't help but kind of get into it?
Oh well, it's tough for me to buy into to not supposed to, because there's a whole bunch of things that like I'm not supposed to do. And so like I just enjoy them. I don't really have too many guilty pleasures. I do know something that I frequently go back to is Korn's "Y'all Want a Single." If I'm standing over a deadlift bar, or if I'm about to get under the squat bar, I may tell Siri to turn on some Korn, and I'll go with "Y'all Want a Single" because it gets me to where I need to be. Not necessarily. It's just fun. It's fun to like, and also I hit. I think 425 was my squat PR, and I think I hit that while Kenny G's Christmas album was playing, and it was Auld Lang Syne, because I was listening to Random Shuffle, and Auld Lang Syne came on, and in my head I'm like, New Beginnings. I'm like, why don't I just keep listening to that? And so I think I hit my all-time squat PR listening to Kenny G play Auld Lang Syne. And so like I don't even like is it a guilty pleasure? I don't know, but just I'm not a very cohesive individual in that. It's very random for me. And so pretty much whatever comes on, man. If it suits the moment, then it suits it.
I can just picture this right now. We're getting ready to go. Korn's playing, the headbanging going on. And also Kenny G comes on. It's like the saxophone starts playing, the head starts going side to side instead of up and down. Just gonna get you, settles your whole body into it. I get it. I can feel that. Now, one of the things I always ask everyone, and I mean, sports has played an integral part in every single one of our lives. So kind of just tell us how you got into sports at a young age.
Oh, I mean, it's the typical story. I was a miracle baby, as we like to call ourselves. There's no mistakes. My brother is 9 years older than me, and watching him compete, watching him go through things and teach me things, because you know, there were a lot of things in a learning process for somebody with ADHD in myself that were very different, right? And so you experience things through sports, and it's a little different. It took a long time, but sports were always there. It's not something that basketball doesn't give up on you, right? Running doesn't give up on you. It's always there. And so going through those processes, I didn't make a team until the summer before ninth grade was the first time I had made a basketball team. And it was really a lot of it, of course, is physical maturity. I was this gangly, oddly proportioned child, and I sort of suddenly grew into things, right? And I was able to move. Um, but I don't know, Matt, how much I would have talked to people. I don't know how much I would have communicated with people and understood people if not through the vehicle of sports. My wife played basketball. My wife is gorgeous. I would have never spoken to her had I not had the confidence that was developed in just how to communicate to people, how to interact with people, which is kind of like a training ground, right? We used to go to a gym and I've seen like people on TikTok marveling at pickup basketball because they don't understand how 10 people can suddenly coordinate this event, but we would do it all the time, right? And you would figure out who could do what, how you were going to do it, and the best way to work together. And we do this without even thinking about it. And there's so many places in the world where that doesn't work. We don't have a scoreboard, and everything is just exploiting other people. But it's truly, in sports, it's a collaborative effort that people learn at a very young age without even knowing it. And then you grow up and you get out into the alleged real world, where nothing makes sense, and sports is still there, at the very least. We do still keep score, and it gives you a little bit of context. Not enough context to tell you what's going on inside of the people's heads, momentum believers, but enough context to we at least understand, what people are doing. And so that's what's beautiful about it, and that's what I love about it.
I love a couple points that you mentioned. Just doing it, right? I mean, as kids, you just kind of do it. And I took a leadership management course there, and it took us. We had to do this thing. We had started in one spot, and we had to finish this whole line of people at the exact same time. And it took us adults 35 minutes because we kept trying to change our strategy, this and that. Kids did it in 6.
Yeah.
because they did the same thing over and over and came through, and eventually they were able to come together. Meanwhile, adults, we always confuse things. We always try to make things more complicated than they have to be. And as kids, sports were so simple. And I love the way you kind of mentioned it. Basketball doesn't give up on you. It kind of reminded me of What Women Want there with Mel Gibson, where he kind of does that advertising slogan. So that's something right there. That slogan right there. You can put that into advertising. Basketball doesn't give up on you. This doesn't give up on you. So I kind of like that. Now, with sports, you kind of mentioned it too a little bit, but what did it teach you growing up? Like, what kind of lessons as a child did you learn through sports that you keep going with today? That maybe set up who you are as a person?
Well, I mean, Matt, anybody that's been on a court knows that 99% of pickup basketball fights start with somebody throwing the ball. And so you get like, you pick up de-escalation. You try to understand people's motivations, because if you want to play the game, then you would like to stop with the bullshit, right? Like the arguing, all the other stuff. Like, hey, I would like to play, and so it kind of develops in you this sense of, hey, I would like to get things done. Not that now that it doesn't necessarily work for everybody, right? But people bring different perspectives to different things, and I think sports really just gets you to a place where it's repetition. Because some people never really communicate these things. It's never really a goal or an effort or anything like that. And so
it's really funny how basketball as a child, how sports as a child could leave a lasting impression on how we view life and how we basically conduct ourselves. Now, growing up, were there certain athletes, certain teams that you kind of gravitated towards?
I mean, really just it's I was born in 1983. So of course, like most people of our timeline of our particular universe, Michael Jordan is Michael Jordan. I saw it's one of those things I was looking at yesterday, like who is the Michael Jordan of blank? People always have those discussions, and I'm always thinking, well, if they were that, then we wouldn't need to call them the Michael Jordan of blank, right? We would just utilize their name, and people would get that particular context. So of course, there was that. When Michael Johnson ran his time in 1996, that left a mark on me, because I'm from Birmingham, so Atlanta was very close. And seeing that's kind of, it was maybe a big piece of me wanting to start a track career, which I'm very glad that I did. And just everything, man, even the games that I didn't play, right? Because consumption of sports content is a lot different now than it was for us, right? So we were full day sports interviewers. We would be on the third and fourth re-airing of Sports Center, and we would see everything, right? And so you see Jaromir Jagr, you see you see all these guys that, like, I don't have a connection to hockey now, but it was consuming all of it in like bite-sized pieces. But there was, Randy Johnson was my favorite baseball player of all time. Just this idea that this massive human being throwing the ball 100 miles an hour with a 94 mile an hour slider, like getting into the 98s. Like I haven't really sat there and watched the whole baseball game in forever. But back then, it was a part of what I did. And so it really wasn't as much what sports as just as it was sports in general. And I was always there, and the commonalities in all of these games jump out, and they're more obvious to me now. But back then they weren't necessarily. But people working towards a goal, it always comes through.
You mentioned a couple of core memories for me there. You mentioned Randy Johnson, the things I think are the fastball at John Kruk's head there. He put his helmet on backwards. The poor bird that Randy Johnson plucked out, like the 1 in 1 billion type situation. And then one name I hadn't heard was Michael Johnson. And I remember being younger, and I remember the whole Michael Johnson versus Donovan Bailey track thing and the hamstring. And I mean, that was quite the debate in track circles for many, many years. Who was the fastest man on the planet? So, I mean, we were not going to go get into that. And then you mentioned the whole Michael Jordan being our GOAT because it's our generation and this and that. I think the closest guy to Michael Jordan may have been Kobe Bryant, but we're talking about like Michael Jordan on the second three-peat. I think the best thing I ever heard. We're not like 84, 85, 86 Michael, because there's no one even close to Michael at that age. I mean, the team wasn't with him, but everything else. So it's fantastic. I mean, we could talk about the GOAT of basketball, and everyone's going to have their own opinions. And I think a lot of it is generational on where you stand on that conversation as well. I think a lot of us can say, like, you know what, LeBron is the best athlete we've ever seen, but that doesn't necessarily translate into the best player. And that's another debate altogether. Now, one thing that I did hear, speaking of athleticism, is I heard that you possess one of the most violent golf swings in all of golf. Like, I mean, I heard that you go out there with violent intentions on that golf ball. Is that true? Like, what the golf ball ever do to you? I hear you crush it.
It's not as violent as it used to be. I am not physically capable, nor should anybody swing as hard as I used to. But there are some remnants of a young man's golf swing that exist into mine, because it's very hard to stop. It's a drug. When you're out there and you're on the range, and you're carrying where other people roll to, and it's tough to stop. Now you should stop, because you shouldn't always be trying to hit the ball 300 yards, right? Especially when you're an amateur. I should try to get the damn thing in the fairway. But it is as addictive as a drug. And the very first time I did it, we're talking in the single digits. I was hooked, because I used to play cross-handed. It was very difficult to teach me anything as a youngster. So I was swinging the wrong way. And when I finally got into one swinging correctly, it's nonstop. And so I was able to get I'm sure it was Rank that told you I was swinging out of my shoes, and I do. But I finally got a new driver, because I used to get busted on for having this ancient driver. And I was able to turn that thing down to 9 degrees, and we're somewhat closer to consistently finding the fairway. But no, man, you gotta grip that thing and rip it. Like, otherwise, what's the point? Like, what are we out here for? I could shoot in the 80s, punching the ball down the fairway. But what are we trying to do? We're trying to create memories,
I'm a cheap person. I'm about one of the most frugal people you'll ever meet. And the way I look at it is, if I'm going to pay for the golf course, I'm going to use the whole golf course. I mean, I paid for it all. Let it go to the left. Let it go to the right. I'm with you. I'm a grip it and rip it guy. There's times when my shoes have actually come off trying to swing. I don't know how violent you get there, but mine is not pretty. I can promise you that. Now, I do know that people kind of probably eye me up, judge my swing, this and that. But I also understand that you have an eye out there for desktop setups. I mean, so when we look at the NFL Fantasy Network here and whatnot, who's got one of the best setups and who's got one of the worst ones that you've seen?
Well, in terms of like functionality, I do tend to give a little bit of a boost to people who are able to have their setup inside, because I've had to set up in the garage a whole bunch. I know Marcus sets up in the garage. Rank's setup is very nice. He's got a very nice backdrop. Florio's as well. It's very cozy and very homey. But all of us on the fantasy wing of the network, we don't necessarily have the capability to dedicate as much space to a look, because one, everybody's pockets are a little different, and two, we're in Los Angeles, right? And so you get to like the best home cam setups. I would say you tend to find the folks that are outside of LA that can have a little more space. You get some really good spots. Like, I know Mike Garafolo and Ian Rappaport have some pretty nice home cams, but ultimately you just need to see a little bit of personality, right, in the backdrop, which, like, I'm looking at yours, Matt. It works. Like, see, I'm just in the living room right now. So it's like, I don't know, is that a sconce? I don't even know what that is. But like, the goal is to get a little bit of personality, and just enough for it to be functional. But that depends on what somebody can do with the space. And so I have to, whenever I'm looking, I'm like, well, does this person really have the space to build this setup, for me? So I just try to pay attention to what somebody's saying, because otherwise I'll get lost in my imagination.
See, I'm kind of like a catch-22. Like, I've got to improve my camera because that'll bring the whole HD thing. But then I thought to myself, I said, do I really want this face in HD? Is this something people want to see up close and personal? Like, there might be something left in my mustache from supper last night. I don't know. Like, who knows what you're going to find there? I love that you mentioned that because we had Lisa Ann on the show probably last year, and she was talking about how creepy it was for this guy to send her this Funko Pop and this and that. She's going off on Funko Pops, and I gotta give the old over my shoulder. Then of course there's a bunch of Funko Pops. I'm like, they're my action figures, and we kind of had a good laugh over the whole thing there. But that did not change any decisions in my life. The Funko Pop game is strong here. It's all Marvel's characters and whatnot. Because you know what? I was so glad that Marvel started coming out with stuff after I had kids, because now I can kind of like, hey kids, let's watch Marvel. So it's really for me, but I like to play it off. It's like for the kids, so I don't feel like such a child, even though I'm probably the biggest child that I know. So talking about those decisions, talking about changes in life, can you tell us about a decision that changed the trajectory of your life?
Oh, well, yeah, that's a very, very, very easy one. I did not qualify for the NCAA clearinghouse. I got a letter in January of my senior year telling me that. And so, running at, Florida, LSU, Alabama was out of the question because I was going to be ineligible. I didn't know what I was going to do because at my high school, an 80 was a C. And so that ultimately dropped my GPA below a 2.0. So I was academically ineligible. And I was standing there at the decathlon. I won the state decathlon my senior year. And the head coach at Troy University for track and field said, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm probably going to do JUCO." And he's like, "Well, what's your ACT?" I was like, 24. And he's like, "I can get you in." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I decided to attend at that time Troy State University, and went to the J school there. Clearly, the best decision that I've ever made. That's unfortunate that we have children make these decisions. That they can have such a determining factor on their life and their outcomes. But I was able to go there and learn how to be a journalist and learn what the broadcast game was all about. Have access to cameras and the football team and all these other things that put me in position to be where I am today. And then the second one was after I was the sports director in Birmingham at the CBS there. And I had some interviews. I had an interview out here at the NFL Network, and also had a very, very great interview at KDKA in Pittsburgh. The news director drove me around. I'm looking at houses. The offer was great, but there was still a chance. There was still a chance that I would get some positive news from out here, and I turned it down. I turned it down because I was hoping I could come out here. My girlfriend was out here at the time, and it worked out. And now we got, including the one that's running around worried about being bored, his little sister as well. And so those are the two monumental ones for me.
You really got to love when things work out that way. Now, you've been in this industry for a while now. You've seen some things. There's been changes like we talked about here. What are some of the biggest changes now versus when you first started? I mean, journalism in itself, it's not, I've talked to a lot of people who've got journalism degrees. Tara, who's usually on our show, I mean, brilliant mind, one of the best to do it altogether. She did a bunch of journalism, and then she basically stopped and pursued another career because it's tough to get into this field. Maybe now things have changed because it's more open and there's more platforms available. But what are some of the biggest changes that you've seen now versus when you first started?
Man, we're in it right now. We're in the big change, and it's unfortunate. It's been a long time. We've seen this the kind of steepening of the power dynamic change between labor and capital, and it's very, very difficult. And it's always been difficult to get in, but now it becomes more difficult to stay in because there's cuts, and profits will be up, but they will still feel compelled to cut to maintain that power differential. And so it's very, very hard right now for people who would like to tell the truth. It's very difficult to keep a job. And I think of the because we just lost Noam Chomsky. There was this interview where the interviewer was suggesting that Chomsky was implying that he was nefarious because he had the job, and he says no. What I'm implying is if you didn't feel this way, you wouldn't be there. and so we have kind of this concentration of people who neglect what's actually happening. I mean, I'm not talking about the sports world now. We're just talking about the industry in general, because you have to keep a job, you have to eat, and so now like the best case scenario is some billionaire buys the LA Times, but now you're just like relying on the charity of a billionaire, and so it's it's tougher, but that toughness kind of extends throughout the entire job market, and we see that reproduce itself everywhere. And so I don't want to act like this is just a particular journalism problem, but kind of it makes it more difficult for everyone else, because if we're going to address the realities of the things that people are facing, and we're going to need to tell the truth about root causes, but when that takes the fork out of somebody's hand, and it takes food out of their kid's mouth, it's very difficult to do that. And I think that's probably the most difficult thing about doing the job, because people have to get in locally, right? I started through local news, but when I started at $16,000 a year at WTVY in Dothan, Alabama, I was the Dale County bureau reporter. Um, when there are better jobs, I mean, better paying jobs, um, and somebody is getting some sort of edict from their corporate, corporate boss that says, "Hey, you have to tell a story this way. Here's the script." I can see where somebody would be reluctant to stay in that. And so it's kind of it kind of paints a picture of a pretty dark future. But I do know that there's folks out there, and of course, I'm not saying that everything's a lie, but it's just the same kind of thoughtfulness that I was talking about with what somebody's home cam setup looks like. I do think we need to apply it to people who cover local news, because they may not get to tell the story that they want to tell, or the story that's actually true, and somebody may be forcing them, unfortunately. And I don't know how to fix it. I really don't.
Yeah, that seems like a problem on a bigger scale. We've seen so many, for someone like me, for example, like I would love to get into sports media at a higher level, but you look around and you see those cuts. You mentioned these cuts, and these aren't just like low end tier individuals. I mean, these are people that you've looked up to a good portion of your career, and you're watching them now searching for a job. You're like, well, if they don't have a job, how am I going to find a job? So I get what you're saying on that. And for me, from the fantasy perspective, this time, like I have my other job, don't get me wrong. So, and I'm not leaving that one anytime soon. It's a nice little pension and all this other fun stuff that comes with it. But at the same time, it's like, okay, do I want to put myself out there when I see everything else that's kind of happened to other individuals out there? It does make people hesitate there. Now, I don't want to hesitate too much here, but I want to know, what are some of your hidden talents out there? Like, it seems like you've got a deep little thing going on there. We could talk about that. We can go deep into this rabbit hole, because it sounds like you've got some great ideas and philosophical. We can go down that chain, but let's talk about hobbies here. Give me a hidden talent that you have.
I don't know. I don't know how hidden it is. I don't. I do like to make things. And I used to make all kinds of videos, and uh, I don't want to call them funny. Sometimes they can be, but I don't. I guess that kind of aligns with the stuff that I normally do, especially the sillier stuff. Because I came in to sports through news, and then I did a lot of sports news, and only in the past like 5-6 years have I been able to be silly on TV, which is which is kind of just me. I'm not a very serious person. I can be serious, but I'm a very unserious person. So there's that. I do have some leftover athleticism in this broken down 40-year-old body, but I don't know that those are hidden. But I like to write. Sometimes make words rhyme. I'm not a lyricist by any means, but I feel like I could be, but I don't have a lot of talent, Matt. I really don't. I really don't.
I couldn't have said that any better about myself, let alone.
There's very few things. I know one magic trick. Um, but yeah, I guess my hidden talent is convincing decent people to somehow have an affinity for me. That's good.
Perfect.
I guess that's the only one
I'm
I've
st-
needed.
I'm stuck at the little thumb trick. That's about my magic talent trick as much as we go with. And we've all been doing that with our kids as long as they've been around, or
Yeah.
the old got your nose thing. But listen, you kind of mentioned making words rhyme, putting words together, doing that little bit of writing. So let me challenge you here. If you were to write a book, and the book's about you, it's a self kind of proclamation of Patrick
Mhm.
Clayborn there, so to speak. What would that title happen to be? What would you call the book about you?
It would be A Skeptic's Guide to Reality. I think would be the title of a book like about me, but it really wouldn't necessarily be about me. It would be just in general things that don't necessarily make sense to me that other people talk about all the time, and maybe we just go chapter by chapter, and I would just be whining about things that I don't like. Ultimately, that would be what the book was.
That sounds like Twitter altogether. Like, I mean, hey, this is perfect. It's like tweets in a book kind of thing. Something short, something simple. I love it. Now, at what point did you decide to kind of go all in on fantasy sports media? Because you mentioned that journalism background. It doesn't always kind of translate to fantasy sports. You mentioned here at NFL Fantasy Live, you're allowed to kind of let loose, have a little bit of fun with things. But going from media to fantasy sports media, that seems to be quite a little bit of a difference in how you're allowed to kind of put yourself out there. So, how did you decide to make that move?
Well, I saw them working on the show. I used to sit in the newsroom right there with Alex Gelhar, with Matt Franciscovich, Matt Harmon, Marcus, um, the whole crew, Rank, Akbar. Like you see those guys working, and it's like, oh man, like I don't want to talk about Cam Newton's car accident. Like I would much rather do that, and it does remind me of my transition from news to sports in the local sphere, where it's like you're working and you look over, it's like, wow, they're having a lot of fun. Uh, I just want to do that because we get to celebrate the game and the people involved with it, which is kind of right what I like about sports anyway. Of course, there's a sports betting, there is a the maybe I'm not saying there's anything wrong with people because sports betting ultimately dictates a lot of people's like a lot of people's joy in sports. I'm not trying to extract from that, but there are some darker elements to that where people view players and games from a standpoint that probably runs counter to the way that I feel about it. And so there are those things, but we can minimize those things, and we can do a show that kind of focuses and centers on the game and the joy that we get, because that's the thing. That's the first thing that we try to get to people is this is fun. Like fantasy football is fun. Like we can enjoy this. And if you're doing it and not enjoying it, then perhaps some introspection and some thought is required. But as far as wanting to do it, it it was easy. It was not a there was never a point where I said, okay, I want to do fantasy football now. Like Dave Frederick called me and was like, hey, would you like to host Fantasy Live some days every week? Like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You might as well just told me that the gumdrops and candy are falling from the sky. Like, of course I would love to do that. And so it's yeah, there was never a like I would like to do that. It instantly like I want to do that. And I waited and um finally got an opportunity.
That seems to be like a thing for everybody. Getting that opportunity is one thing, but then taking off of that opportunity and making the most of it. So when you look back at that starting in the fantasy side of things, what did you kind of realize? I don't use maybe the words made it may kind of not do it justice, but when did you kind of feel that you made it into that role?
Well, yeah, like you said, made it makes it feel a little bit different. Because I think I personally, I can't speak for anybody else. Like the imposter syndrome uh does come up frequently, especially when I look at a guy like James Coe, who's a friend of mine, who's in my opinion more talented than I'll ever possibly be. Right. And then James wasn't working with us anymore. And it's like, well, how if I have to supersede James Coe, then what am I going to possibly do? Right? Like, like that's not a club that I have in my bag, right? I'm not, and so like that those are the thoughts in my head. Um, but just doing that show, um, it kind of drains away those feelings of insecurity, and you get to be a part of something, and then somebody reaches out and says that they like it. Somebody reaches out and says thank you. Um, and I try to, I think people think I'm being like trite or cliche, like when I thank them back. But those people really don't know how much that means to somebody like me when it's like, hey, like I watched the show and like I lost, but like I still enjoy it. And like, when are you guys coming back? That means so much to me. So like in those moments, like the random dude at Costco that's like, hey, I got this pick, love the show. Like that means so much. And so those moments, um, again, like it's a constant push towards whatever we want to accomplish. But in those moments, you do feel like you belong on that screen and wearing that microphone. And so that's the kind of opiate that I'm trying to take every day.
So when you do make it, is that when you get like the keys to the secret entrance in and out of work? Is that when that happens? Like my understanding is you got a secret entrance in and out of work right now.
Oh no, I see, Matt. That's the thing about me. Um, I am the laziest person on the planet, and so in doing so, I will waste time, right, to try to find the absolute most efficient route anywhere. And there's any number of times where that door doesn't work. Like I'm locked out, and I have to like knock and press a button to get somebody to let me in because I'm stuck in the loading dock, which I'm not supposed to be. You have to dodge traffic to get down there, but it saves me like 5 steps, and like it's not efficient at all. But I don't like to double back. There's a lot of doubling back you have to do, and so yeah, if I'm coming in through the loading dock or leaving through the loading dock, there's so many times we all leave at the exact same time after the show sometimes, and so I'll take my loading dock exit, and everybody else will take the standard exit, and we'll get there at the same time. But I know in my heart of hearts, because I've counted the steps, Matt. I've actually counted the steps that I'm saving 5 steps, and that is 5 steps that I have that nobody else has. And so, if I'm going to be one of those influencer grifters online, it's like, okay, so 5 steps a day. All right, we do that 250 days. Eventually, yeah, it's adding
It
up in
adds
my
up.
insane person mind.
It makes I've always heard that kind of play out. That if you want to find the most efficient way to do anything, find the laziest person you can find and have them do it because they will find the easiest path, the path of least resistance, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah,
Now,
that's me.
typically that would mean you're avoiding obstacles altogether. But I mean, we know that there's going to be obstacles along the journey. I mean, there's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. We've kind of talked about some of them a little bit earlier on there, but can you tell me about maybe a personal obstacle that you kind of around here, and how did you get past that obstacle to get to where you are? You mentioned
Um,
imposter syndrome. I mean, this is a common one for a lot of people too, right?
yeah, no, it's very common, and I don't know that it goes away. But that obstacle, right, that I just described in a very positive sense about being lazy. Um, I have to, and it's one thing I'm trying to confront. I have to take better care of myself. I have a knee surgery that I've been putting off for a very long time. I have a really strong tendency. If I can do it later, then it's it's not going to get done until it absolutely has to. And so that's resulted in a whole bunch of I've had 2 dental abscesses. Right, I'm still waiting on getting an implant. I got a big hole in there where I haven't gotten one, and that's one that I'm still working on. It's still an issue today, where it just the days add up, and before you know it, you've waited calendar years to do something that you should have done a long time ago. And so that's if anybody's got any tips on that one, because it's very easy for me to prioritize, the 7-year old, the 4-year old. Something comes up in the house, those things. But I think especially, to working parents, um, finding that place to carve out time to take care of yourself, not just the fun stuff, not just going in there and moving weights around or getting on the treadmill, but to actually have those conversations with doctors, to be on the phone with insurance, to do all those things that are incredibly boring and frustrating, that I put off, that I think a lot of people put off, for time reasons, for financial reasons. But if anybody's got any tips, to getting around to doing those things, please let me know. 'Cause they're adding up.
Shout out to the Canadian healthcare system. Luckily, I mean that puts me through a little bit, but I get it because every
Yeah.
single one of my kids, and there's a lot of them, have had braces at some point. Me, on the other hand, I've probably got the worst bottom row of teeth that anyone could
Yep.
possibly imagine. I've got no top lip. That's why the mustache happens to be there to hide that. I mean, it's not because I enjoy the mustache, it's because it covers up a lot of things. But I still won't go get my braces. I still won't get my bottom teeth fixed. I'm at that age over 40, but why?
Yeah.
What's the point? Tell me what's the point? I mean, I just had my wisdom tooth pulled out the other day so they could put a crown on my other one. Like, it's swollen, it's hurt. I'm like, I don't want that at this age. I don't want to go through
No.
dental stuff anymore.
No, and there's always this drive, right? At least for me, to do nothing. And so you try to get to like inbox zero, kind of in real life, where you just have all these responsibilities and you've taken care of them for a chance to do nothing. But I've got to stop letting procrastinating act as though it's checking those things off the list. It's not that those things are done. The list is still there. I'm just not doing them. And so all these things require time. And so I've got to commit the time, to doing those things.
All right. Well, I'm going to commit some time right now to do some blind rankings for us right
Okay.
now. And anyone who knows this, once you use a person, you can't change them. They go into a spot. So I'll say something, you put them in that place. And we're going to do some blind rankings for Independence Day, the biggest heroes. Now, I've heard that
Okay.
you are an Independence Day savant, so to speak,
I
through my
don't know.
research. And so I'm going to throw these names out at you. And I'll also give the actor to people who are just listening, because some of these names are like, who is that? But as soon as I say who the actor or actress is, I'll be like, oh, okay, I know who you're talking about.
Mhm.
So we'll give you that. You put them 1 to 5, biggest hero to the biggest zero, so to speak. Oh, I like that. I'm going to keep that one. Now
Oh,
we're going to
okay.
start things off right here with David Levinson, aka Jeff Goldblum. 1 to 5, biggest hero scale.
He's easily number one. Easily number one. It's not even close.
He's the hero of Independence Day. Is that what you're trying to tell me? Like the biggest name? Like he's the guy who saved the alien invasion, so to speak.
Oh, correct. The planet would see, but there wouldn't be no sequel. And again, we could discuss the sequel later and on all the failures there. But humanity, as we know it in that universe, would not exist, without the contributions of one David Levinson.
All right. So then next up here, we have Captain Stephen Hiller, played by Will Smith. And hey, we're not going to worry about this. We're not going to keep anyone's name out of your mouth on this one. Where do you got him?
Yeah, and again, I have made several statements, about, the actor who portrays, Captain Hiller, Will Smith, and I did issue an apology. I've maintained, he should have hit Chris Rock, twice, and then, after learning about the joke and the writers that went a part of it, I do apologize to Will Smith. He should have hit him 3 times. But either way, I will put him at, 2. I will put him at 2. That's an easy 2. You made this super easy for me.
All right. So we got 1 and 2 already in place. How about President Thomas Whitmore, played by Bill Pullman? I love Bill Pullman, by the way.
Oh yeah, Bill Pullman, rest in peace. Incredible contributions as President Whitmore. I do believe, he probably had no business getting in that plane. That being said, because of the possibility, I'm gonna put him. I'm gonna put him at 4 right now because I don't know who's coming into the blind rankings. So President Whitmore goes to 4.
All right. Well, next up, probably my favorite character in the whole thing, and that is going to be Russell Cassie,
Yeah.
aka Randy Quaid, the crop duster himself. Where do you got him?
Randy Quaid, is going 3. The battle over Area 51, goes completely different. There's no global, victory, without his particular efforts, because they insisted on firing air to air missiles at this city sized, spaceship. I do not understand the logic there. But planetary wise, nobody would have had that idea if not for his efforts. So I'm gonna have Russell as number 3.
And there ain't nobody going to be crazy enough to go right up the spaceship, right up. You know what? I don't even want to say the word right now, but we know how this kind of plays out. So then, by process of elimination, and you're probably not wrong here, but we've got Jasmine DeBro there, Vivica A. Fox coming at number 5, only because I had to find a 5th person to possibly put into this, and no one else really had any kind of heroic moments there from the movie. So
yeah, ultimately, Vivica in her performance, right, her character, provided that motivation for Captain Hiller, who would have never flown, he would have never stolen the helicopter, right, to go back, would have never reunited the president and the first lady, and would have never gotten that extra bit because there was already enough building that personal relationship and punching out the alien and bringing it back to Area 51. But that took it to the next level to when he said, I can fly it. I'm familiar with their operational capacity. It's like, oh, it's a no-brainer. Captain Hiller flies this ship. So I do feel, and again, if anybody wants to get itchy about the rankings here, of course, President Whitmore provided a great speech. I don't know how much you need to give people a speech in an alien invasion situation. I think they're already pretty motivated. I don't know how much extra hard they're going to try when they're already exterminating humanity in and of itself. And he did, right, decide to nuke Houston, which ultimately didn't really do anything except probably kill millions of people. So yeah, I'm gonna have her ahead of President Whitmore.
Yeah, I mean, you can argue that she could be way up there because without her, I mean, some of these other things don't kind of play out the way they're supposed to play out, and it could be different. I mean, everyone heard it. I mean, I'm guilty. Behind every good man is even a better woman. I'm guilty of this, and obviously Captain Hiller is guilty of this as well. So, I mean, it kind of leads us into this next thing. I talk about the woman being the better half, the real man behind the man kind of thing as far as women are concerned. Now, one thing in this series that we've heard is sometimes you've just got to shoot your own shot when it comes to getting into the industry. And my understanding is here that this does not just apply to the fantasy industry. I mean, this applies to love life here in relationships as well. I heard through the grapevine once again, because my grapevine's wide, is you're pretty good at shooting your own shot from time to time. You talked about basketball and sports at the beginning. I love how I can make everything come back around. But giving you that confidence to do certain things. Did sports maybe as a kid give you the confidence to shoot your own shot years later?
Oh yeah, without question. I mean, at every step of the way. Because I was at work when my good friend and producer BJ Milliken was tweeting with somebody, and I look over. We sat next to each other. I'm like, who is that? I was bewitched. And so I smashed the follow button with the fury of 1,000 suns. Eventually there were tweets and there were DMs, and then I drove to Charlotte. And I don't really know how much of that is shooting a shot. Of course, it comes with risk, but so does everything, right? So does every step we take. And so it's it literally doesn't happen without sports. And I don't know if it was a foolish confidence or whatever. I love this pretty girl I have from the moment that I met her. And so it's yeah, I just lucky. I don't know. That's really the only way I could describe it. Just lucky, just blessed and fortunate.
Back in the days, we could just slide into DMs on Twitter without having to be verified. I mean, those were the good old days, weren't they?
Yeah, I know you could be on Twitter. You could utilize TweetDeck without paying for it, because it's one of the least favorite things that I got going right now. It's like, oh, hey, you want to properly use this website, you have to facilitate a fascist. So it's unfortunate. I wish I don't know, he would go away. But there's a few of us. We're still on the site. It's surviving and thriving. But man, it's a tougher now.
It certainly is. Now, one of the things that we all know is relationships. They're important in every aspect of the way. I mean, who are some of those that you kind of respect along the way here in your journey in fantasy sports in particular? And then who are those that maybe you emulate in your style when you go out there and present yourself?
Oh gosh, there's like it's hard to think about a particular style and influence. Of course, like the OG guys, right? the Stu Scotts, the Riches, who I'm fortunate to work with now, the Dans, right? John Anderson just retired, the Kenny Maynes. Of course, there's that contingent. Then you get your Ernie Johnsons, your Ahmad Rashads. Like we've all grown up watching these people, right? And so it's hard to not think about like their inflection, their celebration. If you're calling a game, right? It's like I'm hearing Marv Albert in the back of my head, right? You see Kevin Harlan and the incredible work that he does, um, and so it's like an amalgamation of all of those people. But personally, right? It's hard not to think about the ones that were directly in my proximity, who I can't use as resources anymore. The Larry Campbells, the Chris Wesslings, the people that we've lost through any number of means as time goes on. And you think about the way that those people influenced your life, right? And you want to influence other people's lives in that way. And so it's hard to go anywhere without thinking about those people and how much they gave, and you don't really get to say thanks, because they're not here anymore. And so you take those lessons that you learn, and you try to pay it back. And so that's where I'm going to start. If you're talking about influences, I used to have a couple of sports guys, and Brad Sherwood and Chris Harris. I maintain relationships with them. Chris is working in Nashville. Him going to Birmingham gave me the opportunity to become the sports director there, and then find my way back to Birmingham. And so that's an incredible. The things that he taught me were big in getting that job. But since then, Larry Campbell carried me through so many instances of news and breaking news on television. And Larry worked almost every day until his final days on the planet. And I saw up close and personal what cancer was doing to Chris. And I know how many people know, how much he impacted people's lives just through the work that he did, right? And the resonation that he had. We heard Jordan talk about that on the first episode of NFL Daily. And so you can really mean a lot to people in this job. And so that's just what I try to do. I try to capture a little bit of that.
I don't think you could have put it any better there. About you never know what you mean to somebody, and sometimes we don't say what we mean, how much someone means to us too. I think that's kind of one of those other things that maybe not a regret, but something that I would like to see a little bit more out there. I love you mentioned Ahmad Rashad out there, because he's one of those guys that kind of coincides like my entire childhood. I mean,
Yeah.
He married Felicia there with Mrs. Huxtable, but he also looks like LeVar Burton, who was like part of Reading Rainbow. I mean, so many different things kind of tie in when I hear Ahmad Rashad. They're not to mention his NBA time there with the show and playing for the Vikings, and all this other stuff kind of ties in together. But now let's move into the last question of the show here. One last two-part question. So I'll ask the first part here first there with one last piece of advice for those trying to make it into the fantasy industry.
Find good people. This is a very, very, very difficult job to do by yourself. There's so much that goes into it. Whether it's a co-host, right? Whether it's somebody helping you facilitate a website, somebody for you to bounce ideas off of. And I guess it's true outside of fantasy sports. But if you've got a person who you trust, right? A person that you can operate with, and a person that makes sense, right? Then that's a resource that so many people don't have. And so I think once you've got that, every other thing falls into place. You find good people to work with, and you can collaborate and do almost anything else. Other than that, just enjoy it. If it's not, if you're not enjoying it, then there's other things we can do. We can impact lives any number of ways. But if sports are not bringing you joy, if you're not enjoying it, it's very difficult to be exceedingly lucrative, right? And if you've got to get your wealth from like a spiritual wealth out of it. And if that's not the case, if you're trying and it's not working, don't quit it. Maybe dial it back. Focus on some other things and just get to a spot where it's joyful. So yeah, enjoy it and find some people to work with. I think that would be my advice.
I have a very much love-hate relationship with fantasy football. I mean, there's times it feels good and sometimes not so much. Now, we've seen your child kind of make some appearances throughout the show. Obviously, you've been doing this parenting thing for a little while, but what's one piece of parental advice that you know now that you wish you would have known when you first started that parenting journey?
I don't know if it's possible, Matt. I really don't know if there's any way to convey the types of feelings and other things, because you run into those people. It's like like as a parent as a girl dad now, it's like nothing has significantly changed about my worldview. I'm very glad that it didn't, but I just had no idea how much I would care about these people. I had no idea how much watching them do things would both fill me with terror and joy. And so I guess my best advice is to be a sponge, and kind of soak up all of these things, and to watch them go through these things and learn things, to have them see you struggle, right? To have them see you be successful, to just take part, because it's such a is it a unique experience? I don't know, but to be a part of facilitating somebody else getting the same opportunities that I got is really just it's tough to put into words, and so I just try to experience all of it, and not have my face melt off my brain in frustration, but just to soak it all up, because it's really I'm literally cannot put it to words, just how much it takes you through.
Hey, I used to be 10 feet tall and bulletproof. Now I'm afraid of everything. I mean, that's what kids do to you. I mean, the littlest things scare me now, because it's, we could talk about that for another show altogether.
Yeah.
But last little bit here. I know I said the last thing was the last thing, but now this really is the last thing. Where can people find you? Where can they get your work? I mean, we all know NFL Fantasy Live, but what else do you got coming down the pipe?
Yeah, we're doing NFL Daily. I'll probably be on there once or twice a week during the off season. Whenever the season gets started, check us out on NFL Fantasy Live on NFL Network. Also, NFL Game Day View on Fridays and Saturday mornings. And then if you don't quite have access to NFL Red Zone and you still want your in-day highlights, check us out on Game Day Live every single Sunday.
That's it. Hey, football season, it's coming back. I mean, football is now at 365, 12 months a year. I mean, it is every day, all day, and we love it because we're all degenerates when it's all breaks down that way. With that being said, hey, don't be afraid to shoot that shot. Slide to those DMs when you get a chance, and make sure to check out Behind the Grind each and every week. We'll see you next time. Take care.